back in the 80s, my Aunt Kay was in her early 20s. She was in a transitional period of her life, about to marry my uncle, but still living with her parents. One weekend, she set out on one of her regular long drives to visit him. It was a trip she often made, crossing several states and driving for hours through stretches of desolate desert highways. There were parts of the journey where she wouldn't see another car for miles, and the silence of the road was almost deafening. One day, as she cruised down the highway, Aunt Kay noticed a dark vehicle slowly gaining on her. At first, she didn't think much of it. She was distracted, singing along to Les Miserables, but the car began to creep closer. The driver flashed his brights and motioned for her to pull over. Alarmed, she turned off the music and started to slow down, wondering what could be wrong with her car. But then something strange happened. She heard a voice in her head as clear as day, "Don't pull over." The message was strong, unmistakable. Aunt Kay felt a rush of adrenaline and fear, and without thinking, she slammed the gas pedal, speeding away from the dark car. The vehicle followed, flashing its lights and continuing to motion for her to pull over. Her heart was pounding as she sped down the highway, unsure of what was happening. As the dark car continued to chase her, it pulled alongside her, the driver smiling as he mouthed the words again, "Pull over." This time, when she looked into his eyes, she felt pure evil, something deeply unsettling. His greasy, sinister smile and his missing teeth sent chills down her spine. She knew she couldn't stop now. The man began trying to force her off the road, and Aunt Kay was terrified. She was alone in the middle of nowhere with this maniac on her tail. After what felt like an eternity, she saw two semis in the distance. She gunned the engine, hoping to reach them and find safety. As she got closer, the dark vehicle slowed and eventually disappeared from her view, unable to follow her any longer. Shaken, Aunt Kay stayed between the trucks for hours until she found a gas station where she finally stopped to catch her breath. She never forgot that feeling of fear and dread. Years later, my aunt was sitting at home watching a true crime documentary. The interview was with a man on death row who explained how he would follow women on highways, pretending to help them with car troubles, only to later attack them. When he described his method of operation, she froze. The man had the exact same smile, the same sinister presence, and even mentioned the exact tactic of pulling women over on deserted roads. The man's name was Henry Lee Lucas. A few years ago, my husband and I, both in our 30s, stopped at a gas station late one night. It was a strange, dimly lit place with an odd setup at an intersection, and the pump we pulled into had no working lights. We were in a Jeep Wrangler with the rear windows off, so I could clearly see behind me while sitting in the passenger seat staring at my phone. That's when I heard it, "I'm not going to hurt you." I froze. The voice was distant, but it was enough to send a chill up my spine. Turning around to look out of the rear window opening, I saw a homeless man standing a little ways off. He wore a tattered beanie and an oversized jacket with large pockets that concealed his hands. My heart raced, and deep down I felt an overwhelming sense of danger. Something told me to leave, to run. But I tried to brush it off. After all, we'd seen plenty of harmless homeless people before, and we were just getting gas. Yet I could still hear him. "I'm not going to hurt you. I just need some help. Do you have any money?" His voice got closer, and I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. As he approached, I could see how dark it was around us, how secluded the area felt. My husband rushed into the car, his hands visibly shaking as he started the engine. Without another word, we sped off, not even bothering to look back. But as we glanced in the rearview mirror, I saw him standing still at the pump, just staring at us. A few days later, we watched a video on a security expert's analysis of a mall shooting. He talked about how some people felt an intense sense of danger right before bad things happened. I burst into tears, realizing that we both felt that same feeling, that gut feeling, that told us something bad was about to happen. I was so grateful my husband listened to his instincts. It could have been a harmless situation, but I'll always trust that feeling from now on. 3 years ago, my friend and I, 17 and 16 at the time, were having a bonfire behind my barn. It was a perfect night, No wind, hoodie weather, and the fire lit up the whole area. We were in high spirits, joking about skinwalkers or some strange creature coming out of the woods. I've always been fascinated by the paranormal, and honestly, I've spent years hoping something supernatural would happen so I could catch it on video. After some time, we decided to walk about 500 feet to check out the pond, which was partially illuminated by the firelight. As we walked, we joked about the creepy things that could be lurking in the woods. But then, something caught my eye, a shiny object about 20 feet away. My friend noticed it too and asked, "Hey, where did that rock come from?" I looked over and immediately I knew it wasn't a rock. We had just mowed the area earlier that day and nothing should have been there. It was about 3 feet long, 2 feet high, and shaped like something crouched down in a fetal position. My heart began to race as I took another step forward, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. My friend started to panic, shouting, "What is that?" But I was too stunned to respond. As I got closer, I could make out what looked like a neck, a torso, and wrinkled gray skin with tiny white hairs. It was as if we had stumbled upon something we shouldn't have. That's when my friend screamed in pure terror. He grabbed me, pulling me away from whatever it was. We ran back to the house, looking behind us to make sure it wasn't following. We told my mom what happened, but she didn't believe us. Later, we grabbed a flashlight and drove down to the spot, hoping to find some answers. But when we got there, it was gone. We drove around the woods looking for any signs or tracks, but there was nothing. The next morning, we returned, but there was no trace of anything. We never figured out what we saw that night, and to this day, my friend and I still talk about it. We wonder, what was that? What did we encounter? I just wish I had thought to pull out my phone to record it. Now, before you go labeling me a delinquent or whatever, hear me out. I've been painting the walls of Birmingham for years, creating art, not just chaos. One thing I've always loved about this city is the hidden spots, the places where the rest of the world doesn't dare to look. Places like the canals in the east side of town. It's not easy to get down to the canal, you know? There's this old, decrepit car park that leads to a hidden ladder, tucked away behind a few abandoned buildings. Me and my buddy Josh, both of us hooked on the art, stumbled upon it one evening and figured it was the perfect place to do our thing. The water was high that day, so we had to be careful, but the spot was perfect. Quiet, out of sight, just us and the walls. We spent the next half hour painting over some worn-out tags, splashing new colors on the concrete, just doing our thing like we always do. But then we noticed him. At first, it was just a shadow, a figure on the other side of the canal, standing in the dim light. We froze. My heart raced as I shoved the spray cans back into my backpack, ready to bolt. We thought for sure someone had caught us. But this guy didn't move. He didn't say anything either. He just stood there, on the other side of the canal, staring at us. He wasn't just standing like a normal person. No, this was different. His legs were spread wide apart, his arms held stiffly at his sides. It was almost like he was posed, frozen in place. He looked lifeless, like a mannequin someone had forgotten to paint. I glanced over at Josh. He looked just as freaked out as I felt. Neither of us said a word. But Josh, being Josh, decided to shout across the water, "Hey!" His voice cracked in the silence. "You all right, mate?" There was no response. Not even a blink. Just this dead, empty stare from the man. I thought it was a terrible idea to provoke him, but Josh wasn't backing down. "Oi," he yelled again. "What's your problem?" Still nothing. The man didn't flinch, didn't move an inch. He just stared at us, his eyes hollow and cold. We exchanged nervous looks, and without saying another word, we decided to move on. Keep painting. Maybe he was just some random guy. Maybe he was as lost as we were. An hour passed, and the unease slowly faded, or at least I thought it did. We were down to our last 2 cans of paint, ready to call it a day. I stepped back to admire what we'd done, trying to forget about the strange encounter. That's when I noticed him again. There he was, the same man, standing right in the middle of the canal, still staring, still as lifeless as before. My chest tightened. I dropped my can of paint into the water. The sound of it splashing echoed unnervingly in the silent space between us. I turned to Josh. His face had gone pale. He saw him too. Then, after what felt like an eternity, the man moved. Just one step. A slow, unnatural movement, like a puppet on a string. His feet sloshed in the murky water, his body shifting towards us, one slow, deliberate step after another. We didn't need to say anything. Without a word, Josh and I dropped our cans and sprinted. Our feet pounded against the concrete, the sound of our heartbeats drowned out by the rush of adrenaline. We didn't stop running until we were back in the heart of the city, gasping for breath, staring at each other in disbelief. What the hell had we just witnessed? Who was that man? And why the hell was he following us? To this day I don't know. But I know one thing, there was something off about that guy. And whatever it was, it wasn't human. Don't miss out. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss more stories that will push the boundaries of what you believe to be real. What do you think might still be lurking in the shadows? Let's find out together.